Okay. So for our first speaker today, we have Lowkey, who's a really well-known rapper. And yeah, I'm happy to give you a bit longer because we've had like a dropout. So you can have 7 minutes if you want, Lowkey. All right.
So to start with, I would like to approach the question of what racism is. Is it a biological determinism which says that according to people's physicality, they have different rights and they have different abilities? Yes, it is. What is also is a mythology that becomes part of the way society functions. What is the number one purveyor of racism within our society? It doesn't start at the micro level and then move up to the macro level. It doesn't start at the level that you see on the street and then manifest itself within the establishment. It's the other way around. Racism starts on the macro level and goes down to the micro level. Many people this week will be anxious about following the killing of David Amos, how this is going to affect people, whether they are people racialized in this society as Muslims, people racialized, and people that are of Somali origin. The fact is, the British state, with Operation Tangam, has a military base in Somalia now and is involved in a violent campaign. It's one of the covert wars that Britain has been involved in over the last decade. You also have covert war in Syria, covert war in Iraq, covert war in Libya, covert war in Pakistan. Britain has 145 military bases around the world. The number one key to this status quo of permanent war, of military intervention, of imperialism as represented through institutions like the IMF and the World Bank is racism. That is the thing which buttresses this economic condition which we are in. And it's also vital that people understand that even the micro expressions of what racism is, whereby we're talking about, according to Gary Young, three racist attacks taking place per day on Muslims on average, that in and of itself is far from an organic process. When you are looking at somebody like Tommy Robinson or Katie Hopkins, these big icons of British racism of the day, you have to look very clearly at who funds Tommy Robinson. Well, one organization that funded him is the David Horowitz Freedom Center. He was a Shillman Fellow at this organization while he was describing Muslims as combatants, while he was describing them as invaders. Robert Shillman was on the board for the Friends of the IDF. That's the Israeli army. In addition to that, Tommy Robinson was funded by Middle East Forum. The director of the Middle East Forum is a former employee of the Ministry of Defense and the Foreign Ministry of Israel, Greg Roman. Tommy Robinson even went on a trip to the Israeli state, stood on top of a tank in the West Bank, posing with a weapon, even visited occupied Syria, and came back and not long later said he would fight for Israel in a war. Katie Hopkins has gone as far as saying that the Palestinians should be ethnically cleansed from Palestine, the complete ethnic cleansing of the Palestinians. She also was employed by the David Horowitz Freedom Center, which collects money from numerous different sources, among them including the Koch brothers through Donors Capital and the Donors Trust. What you are looking at is something that a lot of the people that benefit from the status quo have an interest in stoking up and increasing. The real levers of racism, aside from these examples of Tommy Robinson and Katie Hopkins, there's a symbiotic relationship between them and the legislation which government passes. They are connected to people being detained by the Home Office in Yarl's Wood. They are connected to the Prevent program, which allows police to question 3-year-old children without the presence or foreknowledge of their parents. There is a connection between that racism that takes place on the street and the Schedule 7 Terrorism Act. 500,000 people in this country have been detained under this act since it was put in place. You're 154 times more likely to be stopped under that act if you are deemed to be a man of Pakistani origin. Now, what does that act allow the police to do with you? Unlike being arrested, where you have the right to say no comment to any question that's asked of you, you are legally obliged to answer every single question asked of you under the Schedule 7 Terrorism Act. Every single electronic device that you have must be handed over, and the passwords to them must be given so that they can be inspected by the police. These are draconian measures. This is the racism in society. Yes, confront the racists on the street. Yes, it was the unions that beat Tommy Robinson when he tried to run as an MEP, and he said it himself. He went as far as saying, I couldn't compete with what the unions were doing. They made sure I couldn't win. And yes, face them head on the streets. But always understand that the state is the key purveyor of racism, and that these two elements exist in a symbiotic relationship. To sum up, what I would say is, when we look historically at the victories, Notting Hill Carnival is something it is vital that people understand was a hard-fought win against racism. 4 days of rioting and firebombing houses that people that came from the Caribbean lived in, people that were practicing their right under the British Nationality Act of 1947. They were not immigrants. Their houses were being bombed being firebombed by Teddy Boys, racists, stoked up by Oswald Mosley in Ladbroke Grove. Kelso Cochrane was killed in 1959. What was the response to that? The response to that was a victory march throughout the area by the Caribbean community, which continues until today. It is essential that the young people know this history. We've fought them before, we've beaten them before, we will fight them again, and we will beat them again.
Okay, thank you, Lowkey, for your contribution there. Just to look at the speakers. As I mentioned, generally you're going to have up to five minutes each, with some exceptions for 7 minutes. Basically, I'm going to hold up a sum up sign when you have a minute left, basically. So that's a bit clearer for everyone who's just joined. And as I mentioned, to those who might be late to the session, Cochrane from Love Music Hate Racism won't be here because of due to an important family issue. So the next speaker I will be bringing on will be Alex Lasado, who's national organizer at Love Music Hate Racism. Open, floor's open.
Thank you, Lois. I just also want to thank Lowkey as well. It's always so inspirational to hear you speak. I look forward to this conference every year to hear your contributions. And we will be mentioning Lowkey. I will be mentioning him at the end of my bit. As she said, Zach's not here today, and I'm not as much of a wealth of knowledge as he, but I want to talk about some of the recent happenings with Love Music Hate Racism. I think most everybody in here will know the history of how we're derived from Rock Against Racism of the late 70s, and how the Red and Roger came together to put on shows, bringing together punks and rastas and showing that and putting a stop to the National Front, using music and concerts basically as a vehicle. I think everybody in here probably knows that history, or if you don't, I would love to plug the movie White Riot, which is a documentary that shows that history in a really beautiful way. So going off the back of that, something that we did in August, we had a free festival in Becontree, which was celebrating 100 years of Becontree Estate, which is arguably the longest standing public housing estate in all of Europe and definitely in England. Where it's been housing working class people the whole time. And we brought down Joe from Idols, did a DJ set. We had Yolanda Browne, local to Barking. We had the legendary Don Letts and the legendary Dennis Bavell. Also performing was Balimaya Project, Tina Edwards, Nova Twins, Frank Turner. And we formed a collective of musicians called the LMHR, Love Music Hate Racism collective, which featured Lady Sanity from Birmingham and a couple other MCs, Lloyd Luther and Consensus. I say all this because Wayman, one of the founders of Love Music Hate Racism, 10 years ago in the park that we had that festival, Parslows Park, he and one of the sitting councilmen in the borough were banned from this park, and they were told, you'll never step foot in here again. And the BNP had 12, I believe it was 12 seats, and the BNP was thriving in the area. And the reason I mention that is 10 years on, we threw a free festival for the residents of the place with a banner that said Love Music Hate Racism, where we had panels in a tent alongside Stand Up to Racism, on the very ground that there's no way we could have been present. That was being controlled by the BNP. And I think the reason I mention that is not to pat ourselves on the back and say, look, we threw a free gig and everybody had fun, but to say that conferences like this and the anti-racist message in all forms must continue to permeate. And the harder we push, I think the better the results. And I'll never forget when I was sitting there with Councillor Rodwell and Wayman. They said, "Can you believe we're standing here on this stage? This is unbelievable." When they brought out a junior mayor, to introduce one of the acts, which was a 16-year-old black girl, and her father was filming. And they said, "There's no way this would have happened 10 years ago." And I think it's important that to really drive that message home. So that was a very fun day, and something that we're going to do this year, taking a quote from the famous letter written by Red. In response to Eric Clapton's racist tirade to the press back in the late 70s, he said, "We want rebel music because we love music, hate racism." We're going to throw the Rebel Music Tour of 21-22, and we've got the kind of the first leg announced. So if you want to get, I'll type this in the chat when I'm done talking about it. So the first leg, we're going to be doing a gig a month for the next year. The first gig, which Lorna will be able to talk about when I'm done, is going to kick off in conjunction with COP26, when the world is going to be descending on Glasgow. And I think Love Music Hate Racism Glasgow is one of the local groups that continue to shine and really just do amazing work and put on amazing gigs. And this is not going to be any different. Lowkey himself is going to be in the flesh, so I'm told. And it's at Mono, which is an incredible venue, and Glasgow is going to be quite a scene. So go tell your Glaswegians, your Glaswegian friends, November 6th, if you can manage to get a train ticket, get up there for November 6th. November 28th is at Matt and Fred's in Manchester. We're going to be in Swansea in December. In January, we're going to be in Huddersfield. And then from then on, February on to the rest of the year, we'll do a gig a month. Tune in to Speak Up Thursday on Soho Radio, where we speak to artists and about the ways we can continue to use music and art as a means for change. I've been told to sum up. I think that's me, and we'll see in one of these around UN Anti-Racism Day in March. And I'm going to put our email in the chat. Do put your email in the chat if you want to get involved with one of the local gigs that's going to be happening this year, because this is what we need to mobilize around. I'd love to see all the comrades coming out to these gigs and getting people down to the gigs, because we still believe that through music and through art, we can continue to make a change. Thank you. I think that's my time.
Okay, thank you, Alex, for that. And looking forward to all the gigs happening again. Now we can go to gigs again. Woo! So the next speaker I'm going to call will be will be Jermain Jackman, who's also a singer and activist and was winner of The Voice. Take the floor. And as I said, you've got 5 minutes, and then I'll sum up you up or hold my sign up at 1 minute when you've got 1 minute left. Cool.
Appreciate it. Good afternoon, friends, comrades. It's great to be here. I've just finished another panel discussion, so I'm clicking in and out of Zoom meetings all afternoon. So I'm looking forward to hearing more in this room and throughout the day. Shout out and solidarity to all of the panelists who have spoken so far, and for putting this together. It's great to be around and hear such a great conversation. I have a poster behind me by Paul Robeson. Everyone knows Paul Robeson. And it says, as an artist, I come to sing, but as a citizen, I would always speak up for peace. And it sort of set me, the reason why that resonates with me so much is because you can't remove politics from music. You can't remove it. It's woven together. And I actually wrote my dissertation on the relationship between politics and music. And the reason why, I can just talk about my experience as a young Black man on a reality TV show like The Voice, winning The Voice, becoming the first Black man to win any televised singing competition this country has ever had. And my experiences on that show, experiences such as the executive producers trying to say, oh, well, you're young, you're Black, you're from Hackney, are you involved in any gangs? Let's see if we can shape a story around you like that. Or them telling me to sing Frank Sinatra because the people who vote are called Middle England and they won't vote for a young Black man singing Usher songs. Those are some of the experiences. Or even when I was trying to produce my first music video and I sat around my record label table and they showed me the lead women who were going to be in my music video. And I said, where are the Black women? Where are the dark-skinned Black women? And they said, well, Jermain, you need to remember what country you're in. These are some of the experiences, not only of myself, but so many young Black artists in this country, around the world. And that's why, not only because of those experiences, that I'm very vocal. And the question is, how do we build an anti-racist culture? It's about artists standing up, speaking out on injustice. Like Paul Robeson spoke about, speaking out for peace and unity. When we see injustice, and music has a great way of transcending borders, transcending cultures, a way of people, a way of communication. We can write about it in our songs. We can show and highlight it in our artistry. And that's how, like Alex worded it perfectly, music and art can change the world because it can, and it has done. We've seen, in my dissertation, I wrote about the Harlem Renaissance and how I believe we're living in a Black British Renaissance. Because we saw after the Spanish flu, the migrations of African Americans to places like Harlem and how that was a burst of culture and creativity, anti-racist culture and creativity, to speak up and speak out against some of the oppressive policies at the time. And I think that artists today, even though back in the day, record labels really didn't want artists to speak out on certain issues, we're seeing individuals like Dave, like Stormzy, call out Theresa May, call out Boris Johnson on their bullshit, call out some of their racist policies, call out their lack of action on Grenfell Tower, call out their lack of action in terms of international relations. And this is what we need. We need artists to be brave and bold and Black and speak up and speak out. That's what I'm engaging with more and more artists to be brave and bold on. But also, onto Lowkey's point, education is key. Education is completely key. I've done a lot of work with Show Racism the Red Card, and I've seen the amazing work that they do in some of the schools around the country in engaging young people and educating them on the ills of racism, how it operates as a system, an oppressive system. And I love to support organizations like that. And when they're educating young people, it's providing them with the skills and tools to educate others and even educate some of their racist parents too. When we think about some of the communities around this country, but ultimately music and politics is woven together. And what I would love to see in how we build a more anti-racist culture is through artists being brave, being bold, speaking up and speaking out on stages, in their songs. I do it all the time. People are used to my shows nowadays where I cuss out Boris Johnson during my shows, but we need artists to be brave and bold about that. So thank you so much for having me. And I'm looking forward to more in this conversation.
Okay, thank you, Jermain, for that. I'm going to bring on our last speaker of the session before we open the floor, and her name is Lorna Mckinnon, and is a singer and activist, musician, and also part of Music Hate Racism Glasgow. Yeah, you've got 5 minutes. And just to clarify with everyone, we are recording this session, but it's only the speakers being recorded, so you can have your camera on if you want. Yeah, sorry, I was meant to put that in earlier. Okay.
Cheers, Lois. And yeah, it's really fantastic to hear from the panelist speakers. Alex, that was really good to contextualise the plan for LMHR over the year. I think it's brilliant that we've got that scale to actually work with as well, something on a national level. And Jermain and Lowkey, really, really big fan, guys. It was really terrific to hear you speak. And to follow on from where Jermain left it, I too, by the way, you should come, Jermain, to this gig in Glasgow. We'd have a lot to talk about. I also did my dissertation on the connection between music and politics. I did it about anti-apartheid music in South Africa and how that fueled the movement. And that is exactly, and exactly what you talked about as well. That is exactly what Love Music, Hate Racism is about. You know, Lowkey spoke about what is racism and how it is that we defeat it. How we defeat it is unity. We have to be united in our approach to fighting off racism. We have to chase racists and Nazis and fascists out of our streets anytime they appear. But also, crucially, what is it that we do? We bring the music, culture, and art, and music unites people. As you know, Jermain has probably written a lot about in his dissertation. That's the key component of what this campaign is about. So Alex talked about the national stuff that's going on. I'm going to give a bit of a local example from our group up in Glasgow. Alex mentioned that we've got a big gig coming up. It is going to be the first in that year-long series of the Rebel Music Tour. And we're really, really thrilled to have Lowkey on the bill for that. And you'll be in great company, Lowkey. We've got a fantastic Edinburgh band, 3 women rappers called Honey Farm. We've also got Gabbo. So it's going to be a really good event. And why we're doing it is, of course, because the world is coming to Glasgow. It's something like 16 or 15 more sleeps until the 1st of November when the world comes to Glasgow. And one of the key things I think LMHR has done in Glasgow to respond to some of the climate stuff has just been to simply provide that link. And I think that's one of the main things that we always are doing. Racism seeps into every aspect, permeates every aspect of our lives. And when it comes to the climate stuff, one of the key arguments we were making was the really strong link there between anti-racist work that we're doing, but also climate justice, climate migration. So we held different meetings about that. And really that's kind of the link for us for this gig. And it's been really well received. I think it's going to be a sellout show. It's a gig in the city centre, a very, very hard place to book on that date, I'm sure you can imagine. But I wanted to say a bit about the context that we managed to build this gig from. In Govanhill, that's where I'm from, that's where I grew up. Govanhill is one of the most multicultural areas in Glasgow. It has such a proud and very long-standing anti-racist history. Some things had been, as always, racism starts to pop up its ugly head in places. And in Govanhill, that took the shape, that took the form. And most recently we had Jada Franson dare to try and stand as a candidate in the Govanhill area. We had anti-Irish stickers going up round in the streets. We had anti-Semitic posters going up in windows. There was even some horrific racist graffiti that went up in our local park. How is it that we responded to that? We did it, first of all, by uniting with anti-racists all across the city. And we came together and started to build more concretely around anti-racism. And what we did was one of the things we did was we hosted an anti-racist music festival in the streets of Govanhill. There was about, I don't know now, between 2,000 and 3,000 people that poured through the streets of Govanhill, musicians from all different cultures and backgrounds and ages, and just filling the street with music. We literally drowned out any type of racist voice in the streets that day. There was no space for it. We filled the streets with music. And another reason we were able to pull off that festival was Lowkey mentioned a sort of similar victory that I wanted to mention. We have a similar one in Glasgow. When the Home Office came to Kenmure Street, again, that's right where I grew up, and essentially, there's no other word for it, they tried to abduct some of our neighbours to deport them, men that had lived there for over a decade. Our neighbours, literally our neighbours. And The community response was absolutely phenomenal. It was absolutely phenomenal. It was hundreds and hundreds of people pouring into the streets, linking arms around the van. We refused to let it go. It took hours. I mean, it really took an entire day and morning and going into the evening, where we actually blocked this van. We're going and we chanted together, "These are our neighbours, let them go." And to our astonishment, actually we won. And that's, if anything, like that's one of the most key lessons, and I think Lowkey actually said it as well. It's like that is what you have to pass on, is that, you know what, if sometimes when you fight back you do win. And that's what happened that day. I'll never forget the moment when they opened up those van doors and the two men emerged and everybody was crying and shouting and dancing and singing. And what that was only achieved by unity. The media tried to sort of say that it was this sort of spontaneous mob mentality thing. People just appeared in the streets out of nowhere. Absolutely nonsense. It's because anti-racists had been building in Glasgow for decades, right? It was already established that actually we don't accept home office vans coming into our streets and abducting our neighbours. So that's the key lesson there. And when it comes to this gig for COP26, it's going to be a display of much of the same, a display of that unity. Because what is it that LMHR brings to the table? We've said it, we've already said it, but culture, dancing, singing, these things bring people together. And that is the only way that we can beat back the racists. The way I always describe it is, and this is what Lowkey is going to be doing on the 6th up in Glasgow, is we provide the beat that people can march to. And I think it's an incredibly beautiful and powerful thing. And I'm really, really excited for the COP26 gig. I think it's going to be terrific and a brilliant start to a year of anti-racist rebel music that we so much desperately need right now. But I think that's going to be hugely, hugely beneficial for our movement. So it'd be really terrific to hear about what other people have been doing in their areas. And I think the key thing I would say about the Glasgow group is it started off from a tiny wee seedling. That's what it started off as, and it has exploded into this absolutely massive, terrific, multi-layered campaigning group that's very active, really resilient and vibrant and colourful and always wanting to do stuff. We've got an album out that you can, I'll maybe post a link to the chat in. We've got the COP gig, we've run a festival. So I think the key lesson there is, if we done it, Indy can do it. And we can only do that if we share our experiences and share our stories and learn from them, and learn from our experiences and share them. And that's exactly what this entire conference has been about. So it's been terrific to be a part of it today. I'll leave it there, Lois. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Lorna. So yeah, thank you for a great discussion there with our panelists. Okay, I'll bring back Alex then in the order. So Alex, and then I'll call Jermain.
All right, cool. Thank you. I've taken everybody's email that's dropped it in the chat, and just reiterate just something concrete. We'll be doing a gig a month this year, and in different locations around the UK. And there's a radio show you can tune into on sohoradiolondon.com that happens twice a month on a Thursday called Speak Up Thursday. These are, so that's just a way to kind of keep in touch with us. But around these gigs, I mean, I would love to see people coming out, because as we heard from people contributing today, these are the kind of gigs where people kind of find themselves and join movements and start connecting dots and speaking to each other. So as much as we love, yes, it is about enjoying music, and as Lorna so eloquently put it, dancing to the beat provided, but it's also a great place to actually meet, just like how people meet in these conferences. So the dates are in there. That's just the first leg. The second leg will be announced in the coming months. And I've put the email in here. Please be in touch, because we'd love to go to some places that we haven't been before. And I just want to thank everybody in advance for their contributions and for coming into this, because I can't stress enough how important these kind of meetings are. And it's an honor to be a part of it. So thank you to the other panelists. Thank you, Jermain, for your contribution. Thank you, Lorna, Lois, for hosting, everybody on the tech side of it. because it takes a lot for these things to come together. So thank you on behalf of Love Music Hate Racism, and do be in touch. We're coming to your town soon.
Thank you, Alex. And yeah, you can listen to Alex and I on the airwaves of Speak Up Thursdays on Soho Radio, which is every 2 weeks on a Thursday. Okay, so I'm going to bring back Jermain now to the panel. And as I said, you can have 3 minutes, and I'll sum up you up at one minute. So you'll have 1 minute left. I hold my sign. Cool.
Okay, the backwards sign.
Is it backwards? I wrote it. It was meant to be the right way.
Yeah, it is backwards. It's all right. We knew what you meant the whole entire time.
Oh, dang. You know what? Last time I thought it was backwards for me when I looked at the camera, but you know, hey, I haven't been zooming. I've been living in reality now. So there you go.
Love it. I'm gonna go straight to the question about reality TV, and I think I'm currently writing a book called The Reality of Reality TV, where I've spoken to Love Islanders, contestants on Big Brother, X Factor, the whole lot, about what is the experience. And there is no right or wrong route in the creative industry, because and there's no blueprint. We've seen artists smash the charts and not have any major label backing, and we've seen artists fall flat on their face and have millions of pounds pumped into promotion of their music. So there is no right or wrong way, and unfortunately, due to the society that we currently live in, the claws of racism are embedded everywhere, and that includes reality TV and the entertainment industry. So when I do come across young people, because I come across a lot of young people, when I used to do a couple of guest sessions at Leeds College of Music and teach there, a lot of the young people would come up to me and say, hey, I want to go into Britain's Got Talent, I want to go into X Factor. Do you have any advice? And I would never discourage them. I'll just let them know what the reality is. What is the reality of reality TV? And it's an exploitative machine. It is a machine that requires a story. And if you don't have a story, they'll try and fabricate or create a story around you. And it is a process in which, if you're not headstrong, you can lose yourself. In the series that I was on The Voice, we had a girl who had to be sectioned, and a lot of therapy for a lot of the contestants after the show. It is a very, very difficult place, especially for young people, to be on a reality TV show like that, especially Love Island. But we're not talking about Love Island here. We're talking about Love Music, Hate Racism. But just to echo what Alex was saying, thanks so much for having us and being a part of such an important conversation. I've learned so much hearing from the different speakers about what's going on around the world, around the country. And I'd love to, I can't remember the name, but I'd love to come up to Glasgow and hear what you guys are doing up there.
The name of the speaker was Lorna, so I think Lorna's like, I'm going to bring Lorna on next. Unfortunately, it looks like, thank you, Jermain, for your contribution as well, and that sounds really interesting about the book. But there's also a reason why I often don't watch those programs like The Voice and stuff, because I just find them very they kind of stress me out, just a bit like toxic environments, as you said. And so I have got Lorna to come next to the floor, but yeah, I think Lowkey had to leave for another session, unfortunately, so he won't be coming back on that. But yeah, if you want to come in, Lorna, to sum up.
Cheers, Lois, and yeah, that was a really brilliant discussion. It's good to hear about what other people are up to, what ideas people have for more things we can do. That book sounds terrific, Jermain. Something I'm really, really interested in. And yeah, formal invite to you, Jermain, and to everybody that's on the call to kick off this superb year-long Rebel Music Tour in a really fantastic way, a very loud and vibrant way, on November the 6th in Glasgow. You're all invited. It is going to be incredible. Such a buzz in this city right now. So I'm actually really, really quite proud of this campaign. You know, we've really cemented ourselves at the heart of a global day of action by being like, yeah, we're going to kick off this amazing, incredible tour in the city where the world is going to come, and we're going to put anti-racist politics at the heart of it. I was just going to come back a tiny bit on some of a couple of the things raised in the discussion about like the kind of nuts and bolts stuff about how we organise. And I think another one of the key successes of the Glasgow branch for LMHR, Maggie mentioned it, being a choir member herself, but is that musicians are at the heart of it, poets are at the heart of it, artists are at the heart of it. That's who runs it. Do you know what I mean? There's no point in putting on a gig in your area and asking a band to play at it and not inviting them to join the campaign, like not inviting them to play an active role themselves and building stuff. So that's been a really key success of it. And part of why it's so brilliant as well, actually, is because, you know, even for a lot of the artists, there's a varying degree of people's connection with anti-racist politics. Maybe they're quite new to it or maybe whatever. But I think what the campaign's quite brilliant at doing is, regardless of that, it actually is such a huge agitator, not just obviously for the people that are coming to the shows, but for the activists themselves. It's what's the word? Agitating. It agitates you. It makes you respond to things more concretely and bring that to like this wider stage, this wider audience. For example, one of the best things I've ever been involved in with Love Music Hate Racism was being a part of organising a 3-day and night festival, stage at a festival in Stirling, doing the Rabbit Hole. It was massive. It was a huge, thousands and thousands of people came to this festival, and we had a stage at it. It was right next to the main stage. It was basically an equivalent main stage. It was absolutely huge. We had no less than 400 people in this tent at full capacity for 3 days and 3 nights. It was so superb. But I remember it was right at the time that we defeated Tommy Robinson, and I remember there was an anti-fascist punk band called the Kidney Flowers who play in Glasgow. They're also on the album, who'd written a song called Wearing a Milkshake in response, right? And everybody was singing along and wearing a milkshake. Like, that is exactly the link, you know, that you want to try and pull out with these gigs. It doesn't have to be overtly, you know, like anti-race. It doesn't have to be overtly political like that. But I just think that's such a good example for what this campaign tries to do. Is it tries to go into this whole sort of world, right? This beautiful world of music and art and culture and all the beautiful things that come with it. And we try and use that as one of the most incredible, crucial, beautiful tools that we have at our disposal. And the last thing I was going to say as well is that beyond the musicians that run it, I think it's really great as well that, you know, in all the venues that we go to do these gigs, it's all the bartenders, you know, the people that work behind the bar that are in the campaign that help do the shows on the night. It's the sound engineers that we asked, that we've worked with over the years, that came along and did all the sound for all the stages on the street at the Govan Hill Street Music Festival. It's artists, it's teachers, it's NHS workers, it's a whole varied spectrum of people. And like, that's the point, is you want the people that make the art to be at the heart of it, but you want it to be open for everybody to, because again, it comes back to this thing of unity. And I'll show you just one example of the breadth of talent in the Glasgow group. We've got a graphic designer and artist called Freya, and she's superb. And she designed this. This is her album cover. I don't know if you can really see it. Bit of a crap reflection, but beautiful resistance. Glasgow says nay Nazis. And it is a piece of art in itself. So I just like what the speakers had said about the poetry and how, like, it's just something I really believe in quite crucially as well, that we have to pull together all the strands of culture, just in the same way that we have to pull together all the layers of different people, because at the heart of it, anybody can get involved in Love Music Hate Racism if you're an anti-racist. Doesn't matter about anything else. If you're an anti-racist, we want you involved. So again, like the speaker said, if Glasgow did it, MD can do it. And I think Alex said it really well about, you know, really put like your details in the chat, that we do have a national organising group. And again, I think this tour is going to be a really good way to sort of structure how it is we build the groups from there. So if you want to do an LMHR gig in your area specifically, come to those meetings, join the discussions, find out where your nearest gig is for the national tour. Because I tell you, it's one gig a month this time round, but see, in a couple of years, I bet it'll be fucking 1 gig a week. That's the type of scale we should be thinking of for how superb this campaign is and the reach that it really does have, with alt fighters at the front of it. So yeah, thanks so much everyone for contributing, and all the speakers on the panel. It's been superb and excellent sharing, Lois. It's been great to be here. Thanks.
Thank you, Lorna. I feel like Lorna really summed up. So yeah, if you want to get involved, I think Alex did drop our email, Love Music Hate Racism email on the chat, which is lmhrcampaign@gmail.com. So just again, before everyone like shoots off like logs out the Zoom, basically after this workshop at 5 p.m, join Diana Abbott, Gary Young, and a host of leading anti-racists for our closing rally. You can join on YouTube, Facebook, or Zoom webinar, and you can check your emails or our Twitter for more details. And once again, yeah, if you want to get involved with Love Music Hate Racism, please again drop your emails into the chat, or like just like I said, I read out the email already. And just drop us something and we can give you a bit more information. And again, if you're not part of Stand Up to Racism, like please join us and on standuptoracism.org.uk. And again, thank you for all the contributions and to all our panelists for a great session workshop. And I hope you enjoyed the rest of the day. All right.